Let's take a look at grid heads. So how do we set up grid heads? Well, let's open up our template. So this is where we left off in 205. We're going to go through our usual routine here. We're going to do a save as. We can call this one begin. And we'll call this one 206. Good, it's going to save it as a template file. Let's make sure there's just one backup. Great. Let's do another save as. And then let's call it complete. So when we're done this exercise, we'll now have grid heads added to our list of things that we've customized. So we have here in this project notes, this is our startup view. Again, this is starting and drafting view, starting view. And number one, setup template file, check, text, dimension, level heads. Now we want to also do the grid heads. Well, what do I mean by grid heads? Let's click on level one and let's draw a grid. I'm in the home tab and then I go to grid. I can start right here and just draw up to there. Hit escape a couple times and there we go. Now notice the grid head, it has the line, it has the bubble, it has the number. But what if we want that text to look more like this text as opposed to looking more like this text? Well, this is very similar to the level heads. We first need to click on the grid head. We're going to edit its type. We're going to duplicate it and we'll just call this one grid 1. Now, there's a number of different things that this controls. For instance, what is the center segment? So you could have a center segment where there's nothing there, and what that will do is create a gap in your grid. So sometimes people like to leave that out of their grid, so there's an actual gap so it doesn't interfere with their drawing. You can do that if you want. That will affect both elevation and section and plan, so there's no getting around that. What do you want the patterns to be? These are all things that you can play with. Like the level head, you can choose whether there's a symbol or a head at either end of the grid, and non-plan view symbols. So what does that mean? Do you want them at the top, the bottom, both, or none? This is if something is not a plan view. So if something is an elevation or a section, where do you want to see that bubble? And usually it's at the top. What about the symbol? The symbol right now is set to grid head circle, and then there's another one which is grid head no bubble, and let's just apply that and see what happens. Okay, so you can see it, that's the grid there, and there's no bubble, obviously is what it says. We want there to be a bubble, we just want to change the text. So we have to somehow get at this family, and this family is stored outside of our template file. So let's do that. We're going to go to the big R, new, we're going to go to family. Very important to select the correct template when starting. So I'm going to go to, this is right under here under Program Data, Autodesk, RAC, Revit Architecture 2012, Family Templates, English, Imperial. Then I'll go to Annotations, and we're going to look for Grid Head. There it is. So let's open that up. What will we find? Again, very similar to the level head, it's just a different direction. So it says the center grid label at the intersection of the ref plane. So that's where we want to center the grid label. The grid line will trim to max width of drawn elements. Okay, so we don't need to worry if we draw a big bubble or a little bubble, the grid line will be trimmed. The dummy line shows the orientation of the system grid line, and we can delete this node and the dummy line before doing that. So just before we do that, let's do a save as. I know we're going to be doing this a lot, especially when we're setting up. Once we get rolling in the project, it'll just be once per chapter. So this is 206 that we're at here. So 0206. Okay, and now we're going to call this one grid head. And it's the begin. Let's go to options, just one save, and we'll say okay. And then we're going to do this again, save as. And we're just doing this for the course. You don't really have to do these begins and completes once you're using Revit. This is just so we have a record of each chapter. So there's 206 complete, and we will save that. Now we can get rid of that text and the dummy line. So let's go to the Home tab, and under the Home tab, we will find a label. Let's click on the label, and let's just click on screen. And there's only one thing we can put in there, the name. It's actually the number, but it could be the number or the value of, it could be a number, it could be text, but they call it name. Okay, good. I'm gonna hit escape a couple times, click on the text. I'm just gonna drag it and it should, I was thinking it should pick up the center, but it's not. So we're gonna do our best just to align that. We're really stuck here with just getting this as close as we can to being right. Now, one thing that we can do is edit the label, and under the sample value, we might do something like an A. It's a very symmetrical letter. And then we can see how are we doing here as far as being centered. Looks pretty good to me there. Anytime you stretch these boundaries, what you're doing is you're saying, I want the letter, number, text, whatever, to just jump to the next line. As soon as it fills up this space, jump to the next line. So we want to give it ample room, but not too much, just about like that. Okay, the label style. Remember in the level heads, we had to change the label style, so we have to do it yet again. So we're going to go edit type, duplicate. We're going to call this one label 1. Not very imaginative, but it should do the trick. This is stylus BT. Text size, so it's at 3/16. And we were doing all of these things at 330 seconds. So we did the level head as well at 330 seconds. We're going to match that. Okay, tab size, all of this other stuff we can leave. The background, though, I think on this one, I would make transparent. And we'll say okay to that. Now let's just move this over a bit. This is a bit of a freehand style. So we'll just go like that. All right, and we can save it. Now we're not quite done yet. Let's just go to home and we're going to go to line. So we want to draw some lines around this. And we'd like to draw a circle. It's going to be in the subcategory grid heads, which is good because then if we turn that off in visibility settings, then it'll turn off the grid heads. Okay, about that big. That looks good. And of course, you can do these to measure. So you can make these to measure if you have an exact size that you typically put them at. They will, of course, scale with your Revit model. So they're made just to be one size, and that's it. Now you could have a big and a small, but really when they print out, they're printed out actual size. So if this is at 330 seconds, that's exactly what it will be when it prints out. Good. Now we save again. And let's load that into the project. Okay, where's my grid head? A lot of people, they load something in, they say, where did it go? Well, if I click on the grid line, then I click on edit type, under symbol, we should have one called 0206. There it is, grid head complete. We say okay. And then we have our new updated style. Now let's just click on that style. What I want to do is edit the type. I want the center segment just to be continuous, so it goes all the way through.